Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Kristen, and here we explore an experiential, embodied approach to manifestation and spiritual awakening. In this series, we are exploring what it truly means to manifest from your divine nature, not by efforting or fixing yourself, but by remembering who and what you truly are. This is about embodiment. It's about learning how to live from the truth of your being and allowing your outer reality to reflect that inner realization. In this second part, we will be diving deeper into the concept of spiritual embodiment and introducing the foundation of that, which is spiritual sight. Spiritual sight is the choice to see life through the eyes of oneness rather than separation. And it is one of the main, if not the main reason why people struggle with the conscious manifestation process. And this is because they are applying the teachings through a lens of separation. They are still seeing things in the 3D way rather than adopting the new world view that conscious manifestation requires you to adopt. So, spiritual sight can be thought of as the foundation for true spiritual embodiment because it transforms the way that we perceive reality, and how we perceive reality shapes what we embody. When we begin to see through the perspective of our true nature as divinity, as consciousness, as God, our experience of life shifts in profound and often unexpected ways. And this is how manifestation becomes effortless, natural, and deeply aligned. Before we get into spiritual sight and developing it, I want to talk a little bit first about embodiment in general. An embodied approach to manifesting the life you desire is not about becoming an upgraded or healed version of self. It's not about being the best, most magnetic version of you, but it's actually about living directly from your true nature as oneness with all that is. So, the embodiment that we refer to in the context of manifestation is not the same embodiment referred to in the field of somatics. And it's important to understand this, as sometimes they get confused with one another. So, somatic embodiment is focused on the lived experience of the body. It works with things like trauma and nervous system regulation. And the goal of somatic embodiment is to reconnect to the body in a way that brings stability, healing, and a greater sense of presence and safety. So, the goal of somatic work is different, it's more therapeutic. It's to restore this sense of integration, which is usually done through body based awareness and nervous system healing. But when we're talking about embodiment in the context of manifestation, we're talking about something very different. So, this is not about resolving or regulating the body's past experiences, but embodying the truth of who you are. That is the eternal, formless essence known as consciousness, divinity, God, universe, love. It's about knowing this true essence and living from it. It's not about fixing or changing anything, but about remembering. It's not about improving your self concept and furthering this over identification with the self, but about realizing your true nature is already everything you desire to be. Spiritual embodiment means to live from your true nature. It's to recognize that the self is just one expression in consciousness, and that there are infinite ways that consciousness manifests and expresses through form. It means that you recognize your identity as consciousness and that you see through this vantage point. You make this your way of seeing. This is divine sight, spiritual sight. It means that you see and interpret the world from the realization that you are divinity. The version of life that you desire is not something outside of you that you need to earn or obtain. What you would love to experience becomes available to you when you begin dwelling in your true nature and the realization that it is already yours, and you enjoy, celebrate, live your life from there. You enjoy and live your life from that awareness of being. So when we talk about true nature, what is the nature of consciousness itself? So, the same way that we would say that the nature of a flower is colorful, it's beautiful, it has petals, it has a pleasant fragrance. The nature of consciousness is peace, love, joy, true happiness, clarity, contentment, stillness, fulfillment, wholeness, infinite intelligence, completeness, and many more. It is perfection. And these are not qualities that we need to cultivate or achieve. We don't need to become them with our self-concept. They are the very nature of what we already are. So this is not about becoming, it's about remembering. Spiritual embodiment means that we are living from these inherent qualities, the qualities that are who we really are, when our perspective is not being obscured by the limiting and false stories of the self. And as I said before, embodiment in the context of manifestation is often mistaken to mean stepping into a desired version of yourself. So the more confident, more magnetic, more healed, more worthy version of you. And the belief behind that is that this improved or upgraded version of self will somehow unlock the desire. It will make it manifest. But you don't need to become an upgraded version of yourself to manifest what you desire, as the self is not the full truth of who you are. If you're believing that you need to be this upgraded version, you actually believe that you are the self in its totality. You're not actually coming from your true nature. You're adding stories on top of it. You don't need to become the version of you that has a secure attachment style, for example. The version of you that's confident, the version of you that's happy, the version of you that's healed their abandonment and rejection wounds. Even identifying with these positive stories of self does not point to the truth of who you are. It obscures it. You, as consciousness, do not need to become any of these things because you were never lacking them. You were never wounded. The reason that healing, in the usual understanding of that word, is a myth is because true healing is simply the realization that you were never broken to begin with. It's the realization of your true nature. Your true nature has never been damaged by life. It has never been traumatized. It does not carry the wounds that the self believes it carries. So when you are in touch with your true nature, you realize that there really is nothing to fix because who you truly are remains limitless and untouched. So true healing is not overcoming wounds. It's realizing that you never were wounded in the first place. So in the same way, embodiment is not about constructing an identity that is worthy of receiving. It's about choosing to dwell in the reality of what you really are. When you understand your true nature and you embody that, and you begin to actually experience the qualities of it, such as joy, peace, love, and bliss, manifestation becomes very natural, like it's supposed to be, because nothing is perceived as missing. In the state of true embodiment, you know that you are all that is. You are the desire itself. It's not something separate from you or something outside of you that needs to be attracted or obtained. There is nothing that you actually need to manifest because you understand that if you want to experience something, you can. And so you just dwell in the contentment, the aliveness, the joy of that knowing. You enjoy the feeling of it not as a means to an end, but as an expression of who you already are. So, spiritual sight is the space in which the teachings become embodied in the way that you perceive the world and the way that you act in the world. It's where the teachings become applied, and it's the first step to a deep embodiment of the teachings. And it's the foundational step that most people miss because they learn the teachings, but then they continue to see through separation thinking. They don't apply the teachings to their everyday life. And this is where all obstacles come from, the fact that the person is trying to understand and apply the teachings through the lens of separation, through separation thinking. And separation thinking is how we usually see the world from that 3D lens. It's how we saw the world before we came to this spiritual work. So if we are in separation thinking, we will think that the self is the totality of who we are, and that who we are is confined to the physical boundaries of the body. We will have this perceived separation between ourselves and everybody and everything else. We will see the world as something outside of us, where circumstances are happening to us rather than through us. So it's a perspective that puts the outside first, and the inner world takes directions from what it perceives outside. Through separation thinking, we create meaning about the world based on our interpretations of it. So we live outside in rather than inside out. Now, spiritual sight is the other way around. With spiritual sight, we see inside out. The inner world comes first. Through spiritual sight, we are operating from the perspective that we are consciousness itself, which is also all things. So this is an inward facing path. Through spiritual sight, we see things differently. We see that we ourselves are divinity. We see that love and happiness are our true nature, not objects outside of us that we need to obtain. We understand that creativity is the truth of who we are, that creative force is our true expression, that we have the power to do that because we are the power that does that. Through the lens of spiritual sight, we know that the manifested reality is a mirror that functions to bring us back to the realization of our true identity. And so we see that circumstances that happen through us are to our benefit, even if they're difficult, because they're always moving us into our highest awareness. They're always moving us closer to the realization of the truth of who we are. So when we see through spiritual sight, we are identifying as something more expansive than just the egoic self. So we're seeing ourselves in a different way. And because of this, it alters our worldview. It's a paradigm shift. In the old paradigm, we recognize ourselves as a mortal, separate self. But in the new paradigm, we recognize ourselves as the faceless, formless divinity, the creator of all that is. And if we want to really understand conscious manifestation and apply it to our everyday lives, we actually have to onboard this new paradigm, this new way of thinking. We cannot do it from the place of still identifying as a limited, separate self. And this is where people struggle in the community, because when problems arise on their manifestation process, they don't apply the teachings to those perceived obstacles. They may apply the teachings in the sense that they are visualizing or meditating and trying to embody who they would be if they had their desire. But the moment something happens, the moment they see something they don't like, the moment an old story resurfaces and they get triggered, everything goes out of the window. They don't continue to apply the teachings to their experience. The teachings need to be applied at all times. We can't just attempt to manifest something, do our visualization, and then we see a circumstance we don't like, and then we start asking ourselves, why is it not working? This is the 3D lens. In spiritual sight, we have to see it through the eyes of the teachings and apply the teachings accordingly. So, the reason that people stumble on this journey is because they're not coming from the understanding of their true nature. The key to being able to create the life you want and be successful and have it stay and to actually be able to enjoy it, as well as being genuinely, unconditionally happy and fulfilled, is to connect with your true nature first. It's not a step that you can ignore. And many of us do ignore that, especially early in the journey when we are more concerned about manifesting the actual desires. We put the spiritual context behind manifestation at the back in the hope that we can just do some techniques and get the things that we want. But for as long as you're on this journey, you will always be redirected to the true purpose of manifestation, which is to get you into the realization of your true nature. And this is something you cannot outrun. So, in short, spiritual sight is where the teachings become embodied through the way that you perceive the world, which alters what you embody in the world. So, to start developing spiritual sight, you need to practice applying the teachings to your everyday life scenarios. And please remember that spiritual sight is not a magic ability that some people have and others don't. And I want to touch on this because this is one of the reasons that people find it difficult to adopt it. They think that spiritual sight is some kind of supernatural skill. Seeing this way is something that you have to practice, it's something that you have to cultivate yourself, even if you feel like you don't fully understand identifying as consciousness just yet, or you don't know what that feels like. You only need to be willing to lean in. You only need to be willing to try this new perspective and be open to whatever you experience. I noticed that a lot of people will disregard something without even trying it, without even contemplating what it means and how it would feel to see the world from that lens, simply because they don't see like that straight away. And that's why I really urge you to put the teachings into practice. And that's what spiritual sight is all about. Manifestation is an experiential process. Awakening is an experiential process. We can read all of the books and consume all of the content about this, but you will only learn properly from applying it. The word experiential means that you are getting knowledge, you are understanding more about awakening and manifestation. You are up leveling your level of consciousness through your experience. But you can only do that if you have an experience. So if you don't apply the teachings, if you disregard them because you think you can't do it, or because you don't feel like God right now, or because you don't think you can see through oneness right now, and you are not opening yourself to the teachings in the way that it is needed to actually see and experience how they work firsthand. This is where we hold ourselves back from applying a teaching because we think we need to feel a particular way or be in a specific state in order to apply it. So, for example, many people struggle to apply the teaching that no one is separate from you because they don't feel that sense of oneness within themselves yet. They struggle to apply the teaching because they are still identifying as a separate self who is trying to understand. It's okay if you don't understand what oneness feels like right now. That does not stop you from onboarding the mindset of seeing through oneness. It's just a conscious choice that you have to make. So, for example, if you were to ask yourself, what would it mean to see another person through the eyes of oneness? What would it mean to see through love instead of this? You might not consciously know the answer right now, and the mind does not need to find the answer. But in using these moments to self inquire, you actually move yourself into the elevated states of awareness. And this is where a lot of people stumble because they're trying to think their way into these concepts from the identification of being a separate self. When really, what you can do is you can relax into your body, ask yourself the open ended question: what would it be like to see through love instead of this? What would it be like to see this person as one through the eyes of oneness? And allow the sensations in the body to answer. Don't try to go there with the mind. That's the mental manifestation way. And it doesn't have to be an emotion that you can name. And it's okay if you can't describe the sensation very well. Just become present with what it is and how it feels, and relax into it. And notice yourself as the observer of that sensation. And in this moment where you notice yourself as the observer, you are in direct contact with yourself as God or consciousness or divinity. Let me repeat that. The moment that you are aware of being the observer is the moment you are aware of yourself as God. I emphasize this because when people are confused about their true nature as consciousness or divinity, they put expectations on what that is supposed to feel like. They are searching for a particular feeling, or they are expecting some kind of exhilaration that will confirm to them that they are God. But being divinity is incredibly ordinary. It doesn't feel like anything else other than this. It just feels like your own awareness of being. And when we go into awareness, which is just presence, it's just observing, we could describe it as feeling still, grounded, clear, but it also feels very natural and ordinary. Now, the longer we stay in that, the experience of it will change. So, for example, there are moments when it doesn't feel like this steady state of calm and it feels more ecstatic, more blissful, a heightened experience. And this is often the feeling that most people are chasing. Enjoy that feeling while it lasts, but remember that it does come back down. It comes back to the baseline. Now, this high is what most people take as confirmation. They take it as confirmation that that is their true nature. It's an expression of their true nature. The blissful Adrenaline-filled, exhilarated states are an expression of your true nature. They're a celebration of it. But the truth of who you are is awareness itself. So within awareness, we have these peak experiences that come back down and come back up and then come back down. But ultimately, underneath all of that is just the stillness of who we are. So when we enter that stillness, that direct contact with our truth as consciousness, we can then ask ourselves these open questions and see what arises within us. And whatever arises, accept and be present with it fully without trying to seek an answer. Go inward and ask yourself the question, how would it feel to see through this way? How would it feel to see this through the eyes of oneness? How would it feel to understand that this is already done? How would it feel to know that there's nothing I need to fix right now? These are not statements that you need to convince yourself of, but more like an energetic space that you're inviting yourself into. And you can't really do this from the identification of self, but it's a lot easier when you're coming from the true nature. You don't need to be certain of how a particular teaching works. We just have to literally apply it to our way of seeing. And this can work for any circumstance. So, for example, let's say a circumstance manifests in your life that seems to be getting in the way of you manifesting what you want. So, the 3D way of seeing that would be to treat this as a manifestation obstacle that you now have to fix. And this is separation thinking, because only someone who felt limited to being a separate self would see this as an obstacle. If you were to see through spiritual sight, you would realize that this is actually just part of the process, and you would choose to look at it as part of a malleable reflection. And again, I use the word choose on purpose here to remind you that it's not a magical talent, it's intentional. You're choosing to treat reality as a reflection by asking yourself, what does this circumstance show me about who I am being? And then going inward into that. You would be more interested in what the circumstance is showing you than the circumstance itself. So basically, you are adopting the teachings like a mindset. All you have to do is try and be open to seeing what it shows you. Approach it with curiosity and then allow your experience to take you where you need to go. Another example of applying spiritual sight could be a circumstance where something is taking a long time to manifest. So the 3D way of thinking would to be wonder what you're doing wrong, or try to speed it up, or go and look for YouTube videos about why is my manifestation delayed. And this is looking at things through the old paradigm. It's 3D thinking. You haven't adopted the spiritual way of seeing, which would be to apply the teachings, and your desires are already done. So, how would we look at the same circumstance if we were to move into the sensation of it already being done? Well, to do this, all we need to do is contemplate it already being done and become present in the sensations of the body, like I explained before. And there may be some discomfort into this, as it does invite us into our own vulnerability and trusting what will feel like an unknown. But this unknown is the space within which your awareness expands. That's why we need to lean into it rather than contracting away from it, trying to stay where we're safe. When you touch upon the unknown and you embrace it for what it is, you move into that next level of awareness. I will talk more about dealing with uncomfortable feelings later on in this series, but this is how you up level your awareness. Not so much through reading theory, but through experiential knowledge. This means that your knowledge comes from your direct experience as a result of applying the principles of the spiritual mindset. So, if we were to devote ourselves to adopting spiritual sight and seeing with correct vision as often as we can, the majority of the questions that come up in the manifestation community would no longer exist. Because when we open ourselves to a different way of seeing and we embrace how it would be to see that way, or we become curious on how it would be to see that way, we expand our awareness and we are able to rely on our own connection to our own innate divine wisdom. It means that you are more reliant on yourself as the divine for answers. So you're more divinely led and you're not looking outside of yourself for the answer. So, in closing, spiritual sight is the ongoing devotion to seeing through the eyes of oneness. It's divine vision, even when the mind doesn't understand. Embodiment is not about trying to become someone else or reach a perfect state. It's about relaxing into your divine identity and seeing life through this expanded awareness. So, to practice spiritual sight, you just first have to be willing. That's the first step. It doesn't require mastery, it just requires openness and curiosity. Start asking yourself how you would apply the teachings, how you would see something if you were applying the teachings to that circumstance. Pause and notice what arises without trying to find the answer in the mind, without trying to look for the right feeling. Just be present in what's already there. Let curiosity replace your control. Let presence replace pressure. And ultimately, remember that spiritual sight is the practice of seeing life through the eyes of love. It's seeing reality as it truly is. The more we rest in this awareness, the more we remember who we truly are, and the more naturally life responds. So, this week, I invite you to start practicing developing spiritual sight, and don't worry about doing it perfectly. Just be curious, gentle, and open. And notice how things begin to shift, whether that is internally or externally, when you choose to see through the eyes of who you truly are. Okay, my loves, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed that. And in the next video, we will explore how to rest as awareness and enjoy your life. And see you in the next one.